Thanks for joining. This is Bridging Minds, and today we have a conversation with Dr. John Andrew Morrow. The conversation was recorded in June 2024, but unfortunately for my part, due to some family and personal issues and crises, I was unable to get it edited and uploaded in a timely manner. But here it is. So we're talking with Dr. Morrow about his research into the literature concerning the covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christian communities of his age, and actually not just Christians, Sabaean and Jewish as well. There is a set of covenants that the Prophet Muhammad and his initial community in Medina made with several faith communities around the Middle East. And these covenants, many people ask about their provenance and the manuscript tradition, and are they authentic? And there are certain assumptions underlying these questions, and even the choice of words that I would take exception with. But that notwithstanding, these are documents that have been accepted and validated by Muslim qadis, judges, and muftis, Jewish consults, and the khulafa and sultans, the actual rulers of Muslim nations, for 1,300 years, from the first generation of the Muslims up until really the end of World War One. So it's fascinating. He also discusses his journey of faith from his conversion to Islam, his embracing Islam as a young teenager, well over 40 years ago, and his journey of knowledge. So I welcome you to enjoy. Again, this is Bridging Minds, and you can find information on how to find Dr. Morrow's work in the video description below. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No
Um,
worries.
how are you today?
Alhamdulillah. How are things with you?
Alhamdulillah, things are doing great with me. Just here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and was just helping my wife do the laundry right before this started, and I'm enjoying this day of Eid, and it's the barakah will come with it, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah.
It's Eid, and my wife is kind of scuttling about, and um,
Oh, I could imagine. I had to rush. I was asked to lead Eid prayers, and I had to do that and then rush here. And they said, but it's Eid. And I say, but this podcast is also Eid. It's an auspicious occasion. I
it is.
I give very few interviews. And Brother Charles, who's been a friend of mine for oh, quite some time, well over a decade now. I mean, he says, no, you have to do his podcast. Absolutely. And okay, sure, Charles. And we hope and pray for his health and his well-being and his speedy recovery. As some viewers may know, he's been struggling with cancer and other challenges. So if anyone can help contribute to his GoFundMe campaign, I would encourage them to do so. That would take a burden off of his shoulders. But yes, yeah. So I am here.
Well, thank you. So it's a pleasure and it's an honor to be able to speak with you, and I appreciate your time and the generosity of sharing it. And so I send a couple of questions over. I like sort of engage in more of a kind of spontaneous conversation that can become very dilatory, and it would be good to sort of also hone in on certain things and in respect of your time. But I just kind of for starters, one thing that fascinates me and interests me a lot are the stories and narratives of people's lives, and how the stories that the narratives of their lives intertwine in their work, affect their work, and color their work. And I believe that a man's work and a woman's work, a person's work, there's a sort of providential destiny about one's avocation, you know, and it fascinates me reading about you, reading about your academic and scholastic and scholarly contributions. Um, there seems something providential about it. So, if you don't mind my asking, what you're comfortable with sharing, could you share a little bit with me and our viewership about your background, how you came to Islam, and also how you eventually came into discovering these covenants?
Sure. I just like to remind people that this is extemporaneous. It's unprepared. It's unrehearsed. Yeah, it's ad lib. So it's a conversation. It's not a formal academic presentation. So I'd just like to stress that. In terms of my life, I've written about my life here and there in some of my books. Um, yeah, in quite a few of them, in Restoring the Balance, in Controversies in Islam, and many other books. I mean, if someone really wanted to understand me, well, they simply have to read my books in chronological order. Um, and they will see how I have grown, how I have evolved, and how I have matured um, over the ages. Okay. Um, this is something very important. There are some people who are just plain stuck, right?
Mhm.
I have the truth. Okay, that's that. I mean, you are what? The incarnation of truth. You are the manifestation of truth on earth. I mean, I'm on the straight path. Why have you changed your views on this or that? What, you may be on this straight path, but you're standing still. Okay? And there are some people who are on the straight path, but they're walking backwards. All right? So I think it's important for us to grow. I mean, over 800 times in the Quran, Allah calls upon us to think, to reflect, to ponder, to use reason. And so everything evolves. Um, Everything evolves. Thought evolves. No religion is static. Islam in the 21st century is not like Islam in the 11th century or in the 7th century. It varies according to time and place and different cultures and understanding, the level of knowledge at the time. So it is in a state of constant flux. So this is not something that we should be worried about, that we should be concerned about. It is just a part of natural development. As for myself, I've always been a very spiritual person. I have always been very spiritually in tune, as far as I could remember, and I can remember very far back, very far back. I mean, I have vivid memories of when I was 2.5 years old, and so on. I mean, I asked some people, how far back do you remember? They don't remember anything that happened to them, after the age of 10 or something. God bless them. Or some people 5, or some people, they really don't have memories of their childhood, or there might be one incident here or there. But alhamdulillah, my memory is excellent. So I've always been a very spiritual person. From as far back as I could remember, I always felt a profound love for God, for the Creator. And this is even before I was really formally introduced as a child to religion, or before I went to Sunday school, or I was given books to read about the Bible. I always had a sense that I belonged to something, that I was part of everything, really. I felt at one with the one. And again, it's very difficult to describe that in terms of words, in terms of dogma, in terms of doctrine. It's a feeling, and you find this. If you study spiritual seekers and prophets and so on and saints, that they struggle to describe their spiritual experiences, right? That words simply can, and we even find this in the Quran as well. Okay, that the prophet was having visions and everything, and he was struggling to articulate the experience that he was having. All right, so again, you know, I come from a spiritual background. I've always been very spiritual. And then yeah, I was raised in the Roman Catholic Church. Um, and by the time and again, I was given books, right? L'histoire sacrée or sacred history or whatever. Um, and I studied all of these narratives and so on. And as a child, I took them all very literally. Like I literally believed that well, because I had been given this right here, John, read this. It's the story of Jesus and the prophets and everything. I took this all very literally. And I believe that these accounts are actually historical. Um, yeah, I'm not going to say much more about that. But then, by the time I'm 13 years of age, I'm thinking, I'm analyzing, I'm criticizing, I'm critiquing. And so, of course, I want to know, okay, what's the basis? What are the foundations of these beliefs that I have been taught? So I read the Bible. No, so yeah, in grade 8, I read the whole Bible. And there are a few Christians who can say they've done such a thing. Cover to cover, everything. Uh, and I found problems and I had issues. And then I said, okay, wait a second. I want to read everything I can about this. And so I went and I read all of these lost books of the Bible. The not just the Apocrypha, but like the writings of yeah, the non-canonical Gospels. And I realized that, whoo, wait a second here. Okay. So there wasn't just one Jesus, or at least one interpretation of Jesus. There were many, and they were radically different, right? One from the other. Um, so I came to realize, and of course, and you study mythology and everything, and you make connections and you realize what's going on. And so I came to believe, you know, uh, when I was a very young man, that Jesus was a man. Okay. That he was not God, he was not the Son of God, he was a human being. He may have been a prophet, a saint, he may have been at one with God. I mean, I could have, perhaps he was the adopted son of God, maybe, like in a spiritual sense, like not that he was eternal, but that this was just a title. He was a son of God, like we are sons of God, and so on. But I quickly came to the conclusion that he was a prophet and he was a messenger of God. So I studied Christianity in depth, and I studied Judaism in depth, Buddhism, Hinduism, and when I mean in depth, I mean I went to the library, I got their sacred scriptures, and I read them all. Right? At one point, had you asked me, when I was like 14, 15 years old, John, what do you want to do with your life? At that point, and of course, certainly this might sound strange to some people, my goal was like to study Christianity for like 10 years and become a priest, and then study Buddhism for like 10 years, like, in Tibet or something, and become a monk, and study Hinduism and become some Brahmin or something, or some Hindu priest. And I was going to study Islam and, become, an imam or a sheikh or something. I really wanted to study all of these traditions, define their common core. Okay. So the esoteric uh, reality behind all of these exoteric differences and so on. I no longer see you. I don't know if the internet connection has dropped. Can you confirm that we're still recording? Ah, okay, there you are. And now I cannot hear you though. So something else has happened.
I was trying to adjust the view and
Okay, now that's fine. So before I lose my train of thought, um, Yeah. And then I read the Quran. And I said, that's it. I'm done. Thank God I don't have to spend 50 or 60 years in mountains and caves and monasteries in the desert studying all of these other traditions. I have come to the truth, and the truth is that there is no God but God. It is monotheism, all right? And that I found the greatest concentration of truth in that scripture, right? Um, this is not to say that truth is not to be found in other religious traditions. There's an enormous amount of truth in other traditions as well. But I found, like I said, the greatest concentration of truth in the Quran. So I am a person who came to Islam or Iman through the Quran, not through the intervention of any human being or a Muslim or this is Canada in the late 1970s, early 80s, and so on. There are no Muslims. This is before all of these waves of immigration that started with Pierre Elliott Trudeau and this policy of multiculturalism. No, it was very difficult to find a Muslim. And so, one summer I was working for some Pakistani Persian rug dealers, made some good money, worked with them, and I said Pakistan, well, they're Muslims, and I asked the gentleman, you know, can you tell me something about Islam? And he says, it's just a religion like any other religion. Okay. And he says, by the way, you want to go to a strip joint? I'm like, and so I'm on this spiritual quest. Okay? And I'm here, dude, okay? I'm 15 years old. He says, don't worry, I'll get you a fake ID. And like, here I am. I'm seeking for sainthood. You want to be a holy man or something. And these people were like, okay, finally, finally, I tracked down a mosque. I was the Jammy Mosque in Toronto. And well, these were the first Muslims that I met. And yes, I did meet some decent human beings. But unfortunately, I fell upon the people who call themselves Salafiya Jihadiya. So these were Salafi Wahhabi Takfiris. Uh, and I was always a person who was like for social justice and revolution and everything, but it was within a moral and ethical framework. All right. So I wasn't the type of guy who'd say, yeah, shining path, way to go, massacre the peasants, or Mao, yeah, cultural revolution, genocide, or Stalin, starve the people to death, make them eat their children. No, I was more connected with the liberation theologians in Latin America. I was fond of Che Guevara, the Sandinistas, and these people who were coming. Yes, they were socialist, but very light. They were profoundly influenced by Catholicism and Christian values and so on. So yeah, I was all down with fighting the oppressors, but I wasn't down with killing innocent people and civilians and things like that. So the mosques were literally crawling with terrorists or terrorist sympathizers in those days. And of course, I want to stress that 99% of Muslims do not support extremism or terrorism or anything like that. But this coincided with the war, with the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, and it was the policy of Western powers to support those people who were fighting the Russians. It was a proxy war. And so they amplified their voices, as we know very well. And their propaganda, uh, they spend billions and billions of dollars in propaganda to spread the radical extreme Islamist ideology. And so these are the people that I came across. They were actively recruiting young people like me, shipping them off to Afghanistan. But not only that, some brothers I know ended up waging jihad in Mindanao, in the Philippines, in other parts. This was all part of, the caravan led by Abdullah Azam, who, by the way, did lecture in some of the mosques that I attended. And of course, this is the yeah, this is yeah, the
Oh, that
grandfather, huh? This
that must have been in the like, was that like in 81, 82, 83, kind of that era?
Yes, yes. This he was the godfather of the international jihad. He was the patron and the mentor of Osama bin Laden and all of the other monstrosities that happen. I had his tapes. This is what they were giving to me, and so on. People were circulating videos of all kinds of so-called mujahideen groups. The imams were praying for them. Every khutbah ending, praying for the mujahideen here, the mujahideen there, the mujahideen everywhere. But these people were not mujahideen according to any stretch of the imagination. The groups that were being prayed for in that mosque were Salafi Wahhabi Takfiri jihadis. No, when you are praying for the mujahideen in Algeria, at that time in that mosque, you were praying for the Groupe Armée Islamique, the GIA, the people who were going around raping women who didn't wear hijab or who wore bad hijab, slitting their throats, committing all kinds of atrocities. These are the people that they were praying for. These are people, I mean, I sat down with these people. I was part of these people. I was a little bit bewildered. No, I'll be very honest. I was profoundly traumatized. I was in meetings where hits were being placed on people. I was in meetings where they sat down to say, okay, Salman Rushdie published a book insulting Islam. Have you read it? No, it's haram to read it. And so we have to kill anyone, well, we can't kill Salman Rushdie. That's too difficult. But, anyone who publish it, who prints it, who sells it. And so these brothers were planning to go to like a Barnes and Nobles or the equivalent or something to just go kill a teller or something. Okay, these are the type of people that I was dealing with. Very dangerous people, unhinged people, deeply disturbed people. Okay, and so remember where I was coming from. A spiritual young man committed to social justice. Let me give you an analogy. It's like, you're a secular liberal or you're this or that or you're what God knows what you are, and you're on a quest to find the truth and you read the New Testament and you say, wow, Jesus is a super hippie. I love him. He's so cool. He's loving. I found Christ. And you want to go to a church. You want to embrace Christianity, right? And so, maybe you're looking for the Roman Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, or something like that. You might even want to be, an Anglican or something. And you come across the Aryan Nation or the KKK. So this is the analogy. I'm not lambasting Muslims or Islam or anything like that. I mean, for God's sake, I'm a Muslim. I've been defending Islam for the past 40 years. I'm just trying to say that that is the analogy. Those people do not represent Islam. They don't reflect the Quran at all. In the same way that these white supremacists and Christian fundamentalists do not represent the teachings of Jesus Christ in any way imaginable. So I was profoundly traumatized by my experience among these people. And of course, they're all very welcoming. It's kind of like a cult, They want to get converts. They want to get recruits. But by the way, the people who were recruiting us, they would never go off to jihad themselves. And they would never send their kids off to blow themselves up. But, there's a whole ideology behind this, right? And the ideology is, God is, well, forget about Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Forget about that. He's Al-Muntaqim. He's the avenger, right? He's the deceiver. They focus on all of those attributes. He's not, Al-Wadud, the loving. No, no, no. Al-Ghafur. None of that. This is a God of wrath and vengeance and fire and brimstone who, and all they were giving us were books about, and I mean, they're all spurious, all these traditions about all these horrors about the tortures of hell and everything. The worst horror movie doesn't compare to what's in the hadith literature about these tortures of hell. And so basically, all of the people I was surrounded with, they believed that they were condemned, that they were going to burn in hell. Okay? And that the only way that they had any chance of going to heaven, Shahada, brother, martyrdom. It's the only guarantee. This was a process of brainwashing beyond belief. Okay, so anyhow, now these people, open your mind, think, read the Quran. And, they're really good. They'll even use the historical critical methodology to undermine the Bible and all of that to destroy your faith, to replace it with this ideology. Okay. But don't ever try to apply any of these scholarly methods to the Quran or the Hadith or the Sirah or anything like that. It was basically, you're in. The only way out is you kill yourself or we will kill you. Okay. It's like the mafia. The only way out is death with these people. So yeah, you can quite, I mean, when you're interested in becoming Islam, you can ask any question, ask, and they'll give you an answer and this and that. But once you take your Shahada, they expected blind allegiance, complete and total taqlid from qallada, which means to put a leash around the neck of a dog. Okay, this is it, blind following. If you question anything, it was everything to these people was, bid'ah, or it was haram, right? This is bid'ah, this is haram, right? This is kufr, this is shirk. This is, these are powerful, powerful, charged words, okay? Because you know what comes after that. If you're involved in bid'ah, if you're doing kufr, if you're doing shirk, then you're a murtad, or you're a kafir, or you're a munafiq, and your blood is halal. And so my blood became halal to these people, right? Because I was asking questions. And once, God forbid me, boy, did they hate the Shia. And, I'm just here, kind of like, a spectator. I'm just like watching all of this and trying to absorb this. And the cognitive dissonance, I read the Quran, which to me is just like a masterpiece of spiritual literature and beauty. And now I am cast among barbarians and savages. You follow what I'm saying? Do you understand? Like, what's wrong with this picture? There's something seriously wrong. And so, once they're telling me all these crazy things about, oh, the Shia, they worship Ali and this and that. And they think that, God was going to send the revelation to Ali and Gabriel made a mistake and he gave it to Muhammad and this and that. And like they worship stones, like the turbas they pray on the clay tablet, all kinds of crazy lunatic things. And so there were no books about Shiism there. And so I went to their mosque and, the prayers were basically the same. Everything was basically the same. And I sat down with their ulama and I asked them questions. And they were very open and forthcoming. Well, rumor got around that I went to the Jafari Islamic Center on Bayview in Toronto. Okay. And, I bump into one brother. He says, Ilyas. Well, of course, that's the name I took, Ilyas Islam, Ilyas Abdulalim Islam. He says, Ilyas, I hear you're spreading Shiism. I said, no, I just went to the mall. Astaghfirullah. You've become a kafir, and so on. And so, anyhow, rumor had spread that I had become a Shia, and that if I went and I couldn't go back to this, to this mosque because there were people who literally wanted to kill me. And yeah, I bumped into a guy, said, your blood is halal. And I said, okay, well, let's go right here, right now. He says, no, brother, don't call me brother. You're just saying my blood is halal, man. Okay. All right, let's go toe to toe right now. Do or die, man. Right? You're just gonna, just yesterday you were my brother. And because, see, among these people, they'll kill you over a rumor. They'll kill you over a rumor. So I couldn't go to that mosque. So then, I spent decades among the Shia and I studied with them and I got very, very far in their seminary studies and so on. And to me, that was Sunnism. I said, my God, what a monstrosity. At that point, it wasn't very clear to me that this was actually Wahhabism and that it was not really Ahl al-Sunnah. And it was only much later, decades later, that I came across like real practitioners of Ahl al-Sunnah, wa Tasawwuf, and the Sunni Sufis and so on. I said, Alhamdulillah, what a breath of fresh air. Okay. But of course, those people have been marginalized. Sunnism, due to all of these books and all of their propaganda and billions of dollars, is essentially, for some people, morphed into Salafism and Wahhabism. They can't even distinguish, they'll say, I'm a Sunni, I'm a Hanafi, I'm a Shafi. And I ask like very specific little questions. And it's clear to me that this is not Sunni aqidah, and these are not Sunni beliefs, and that you're a follower of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab or Ibn Taymiyyah and so on. So again, people claim to be one thing when in reality, they've been duped and deceived, and there's something else. So that's just a little bit about my experience. I spent a lot of time studying with the Shia, the 12er Shia, and of course also some Sufi scholars and authorities. And all of this while I was completing my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD, and so on, and studying Islam from, an academic point of view, from Muslims and also non-Muslims, from bona fide, genuine scholars. So that's a little bit about my journey in Islam. It was profoundly traumatic. I have not healed. I have not been able to work through all of that. Sometimes talking about it is therapeutic, and I am not the only one who has had similar experiences, right? Now, some it was through radical Islam. Some was through, have had really traumatizing experiences following the Sufi path, to realize that they were following, um, well, how could I put it? A false guide, false authorities, uh, corrupt people, that they were being misled, some people for decades and decades. But anyhow, the fact of the matter is, and as much as I lament to share these statistics, Muslims are always boasting about how many people embrace Islam. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. I'm sorry, do your studies. About 80% of people who embrace Islam are no longer Muslim 10 years after they converted. So this religion is hemorrhaging. Okay, not only are converts leaving Islam, but so are born Muslims leaving Islam. Uh, if you look at Iranian expats, the vast majority of them no longer identify as Muslim. If you look at serious studies, I'm not talking propaganda and foreign agents and so on, but the situation even in Iran is alarming. Uh, this Islamic Republic of Iran has forced so many people out of their faith. And I've published about this in some of my books, how many of them believe in God and the Prophet and the Quran and Islam and how they identify. And it's just been devastating. And it's funny because, some people aligned with Iran and the Revolutionary Guard and so on came to me and said, brother, Dr. Morrow, you need to help us, fight this epidemic of atheism in Iran. And I told him straight out, that how curious. The disease is asking for the cure. The disease is asking for the cure. You are the cause of this. You cannot shove religion down the throats of people. Okay? You're not going to open hearts by whipping women and cracking their skulls open because they show a strand of hair. Your interpretation of Islam and its application is the problem. You are the cause of this great apostasy. So, anyhow, um, I know the Cannon brothers also traveled. They went to Morocco. And again, they were looking for Islam. I know other scholars, they went to Mauritania. I know people who went to Syria. I know people who went to Saudi. They went all over the world. Some people went to Pakistan. These are all, brothers like us. And they came to the same conclusion. Well, basically, they could not find what they were looking for. Okay? So this Islam of the Quran that I embraced, I have been unable to find. And if you ask any of these people, and many of them are scholars and so on, and authorities of Islam, they will tell you, well, because the journey isn't one of geography, it is an inner journey. If you want to find that Islam, it's not traveling the world and going here and there and so no, no, no. That journey has to take place in your heart. It has to take place in your soul, right? And so that is where you will find true Islam. So, yeah, anyhow, that gives you an idea of where I come from and where I stand on myriad issues.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Jazakallah khair, for sharing that. There's a lot in there that touches me. Um, and I wouldn't want to use up all of our time. I don't know how much time you have, and I want to be respectful for it. But a lot of what you said resonated with me. Like from the, so I went through my Salafi phase.
Yeah,
Um, I had some interaction with like kind of jihadi. I admit to like I had I had a lot of respect for Abdullah Azam, and I still do, even though I recognize him as a problematic figure. Like but there is, my wife is from Algeria. They have the Black Decade. You mentioned the GIA, the Group Islamique.
Armée, le
Yeah,
groupe islamique armé.
yeah, and there's the FIS, the Front of Islamic Salvation. And, just traumatic. Like, long story short, not to blather on about me, but I can relate to a lot of what you said in your spiritual journey. Um, you know, and I also feel as if, from my own reading, from my own study, from my own spiritual maturity, there's a lot of what is called Islam that actually isn't, you know. So, and I can see that some of the trauma that people go through. So,
Sure.
and then,
So,
like,
yeah,
I've
when one realizes that there
Mhm.
are so many different interpretations of Islam, and that on any issue there's a vast number of opinions. It can range from something being haram to being makruh to being mubha to being mustahab to being halal. There's like on one issue you could find the entire spectrum of opinion. And so it's important to remind Muslims and non-Muslims that there are many, many different voices in the Islamic tradition. Hence, there are many different choices. And so, at the very least, we should acknowledge those different opinions. Um, and I always encourage people to avoid extremes. The extreme on, the one hand, the extreme on the other hand, and try to stay somewhere around the middle, take a reasonable position. And it's not a question of saying, someone's an infidel or their blood is halal because they have a different opinion about this or that. I mean, people have been killed just for how they position their hands in prayer, believe it or not, which is the most insane thing. Um, so I think it's important to remind Muslims of that plurality of opinion that exists in the tradition. It's a richness. And beware of anyone who says that the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth,
I think one problem
because
is
they're
that,
they're far from the truth.
yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
One problem is that the tradition isn't read. Well, I mean, there's a
Yes.
pseudo, and then there's just the idea of a tradition that is transmitted and you just embrace it blindly and you just kind of like follow it, without introspection and thought. And I don't think that's Quranic. That there's here's something that starts. I was talking to a Sheikh Mohammed Sharif, the Sankor Institute.
Mhm.
Um, I had he and I talked on the phone. I wanted to I asked him if he wanted to maybe do an interview, and uh, we had a nice long conversation about many things. And he and Hamza Yusuf were students together, and they both came, I think, through the Ian Dallas, Sheikh Abdul Qadir, a Sufi, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Murabit, his like Habibiyah Murabitun movement, like back in
Yes.
the
Mhm.
70s. A lot of brothers who came, and different interesting movements and the history of these things within the West, how Islam sort of has slowly like taken roots here. Um, um, and he has had many issues with the Salafiyah because he's of a somewhat Sufic persuasion. But one of the things about his work is he lives in Mali and he's working on an immense amount of manuscripts. And this is a man who has collected manuscripts from when he was a teenager, from Sudan, from just across the entire uh, African Islamic world. And you have all these manuscripts in these different places that are just decaying. There's an immense textual tradition, an
Yes.
immense literary tradition, and there's a literary tradition that's in West Africa. There's one in North Africa, one in East Africa. There's one in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the Arab world, the Indo-Pakistani, the Iranian world. There's there are literally millions of manuscripts, millions of books. The vast majority of that manuscript tradition has decayed and turned to dust. And even still, it's the Islamic world has produced, like, as a civilization, even someone doesn't respect as religion, just as a civilization that's been at this point every continent has produced a literary tradition, an intellectual tradition, a spiritual tradition, multiple traditions. There's immense. And, Hamza Yusuf in one of his lectures, a lot of people find him problematic, but everyone has wisdom and knowledge that should be listened to, even if
Sure.
disagrees. Yeah. He made a point years ago that Islam is a mostly unread tradition. Looking at it from at least as a literary tradition, that the Islamic literary tradition and intellectual tradition is mostly unread. And at the time, I was like, how can that be? There's like all these books and this been published, but over the years, talking to different people who had access to manuscripts, who were trying to preserve them, it's true. There are books within every major university in the Islamic world that has manuscript holdings, whether it's in Rabat, you know, you know, Royal Library there, whether it's in Al Qura in Saudi Arabia, whether it's in the Darul Uloom Deoband, whether it's like Abdul Qadir Haidara, the library in Timbuktu, Mali, the book, the quote unquote badass librarian of Timbuktu.
Mhm.
This is a man who had to save thousands of books from these Salafis who had quote unquote the right path. Because when these Salafi militias, they're supposedly loosely connected with ISIS, Daesh, or with Al Qaeda, who knows? Um, and a lot of this stuff I suspect is like proxy warfare. So you have like spooks, you have
Yes.
international connections of intelligence agencies, and people say, "Oh, that's a conspiracy theory." Yeah, yeah. And then you read about things like Operation Gladio, the Red Brigades, and it's very clear. But like you mentioned, grounds that you're in Toronto at the Jami Mosque, and you have these networks that were being assisted by nation states to fight proxy warfare, and
No,
like,
no, and there's no doubt about it. Like these Mujahideen leaders, um, huh, anyhow, this is crazy. Like, anyhow,
but yeah, I could relate. I could relate
they were
into.
accompanied, they were under the protection of the RCMP. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's just like, they were treated like foreign diplomats. So there's no doubt that, our governments were complicit and so on. They were proxy wars. Yeah, I have
Yeah,
some funny stories about that too.
I'm sure you do. You know, the stories are a kind of wealth. You know, it's like I think a man.
So here I am. I walk into the mosque. Okay, I just did wudu. I'm walking to the rows to make salat, and these mujahideen, they're actually mujahideen leaders, walk by me, and one of them he points at me, he says, "Are you Russian?" Right? And and the other guys had to hold him back. Okay, and I said, "I'm Canadian," and see, in Canada, it's cold. It's the winter, and I was wearing one of those Canadian hats, with fur and everything, right? Yes, I'm sure the Russians wear the same type of headgear because it's cold there. And like this guy was about to jump me because of my hat. Okay. Um, what gives you an idea of the type of people that, we were dealing with? Um, yeah.
Mm,
Anyhow. But
wow.
yes, like you were saying, yes. Thousands and thousands of manuscripts that have not been studied. Now, you mentioned many parts of the world. We can talk about Spain, and I've done a lot of work in that area, decades and decades of work. One of my areas of expertise is Alejamiado Morisco literature, the literature of the Moriscos. I studied under His Eminence Otmar Hegi, who was one of the great experts in that field. I published uh, a multi-volume book on Al-Khamiado literature. Now, again, I mean, it's just a crying shame that there are, hundreds of manuscripts, thousands of manuscripts written in the Arabic script, but in Spanish. Okay. Um, I've translated many of them. There are so many more that need to be translated. Those that have been translated, they've been translated into like modern Spanish script. But this is and who studies this? I mean, they're academics. They're virtually all non-Muslims. They're linguists. This information just circles around a small group of people, but this is the legacy and heritage of the Muslim world. Collection. So there are so commentaries of the Quran. Okay. Well, hey, new commentaries of the Quran from the 16th century, 15th century, whatever, and so on. Hello, this is interesting. Hadith literature, all kinds of traditions. Okay. Uh, I describe them as lost traditions. So these are a hadith and also seerah literature to biographies of the Prophet, biographies of Ali, even like a book on the lives of the 12 Imams from Al-Andalus, from Moriscos. So these books, these manuscripts were all lost in the Sharq, in the East, in the Middle East, the Sharq al-Awsat. These are traditions. They were even lost in the Maghrib, but but they survived in Al-Andalus. This is part of our heritage. And there's Father Stuart Columba and some of his associates who, while ISIS was destroying monasteries all over Iraq, they were going there saving manuscripts because they were burning everything to the ground, destroying churches. And they saved countless manuscripts, invaluable manuscripts, and they're not just Christian manuscripts. They include Islamic literature. And some of the documents that they saved, one of the documents that they saved was a covenant of the Prophet Muhammad that was kept in a monastery in Iraq. It was written in Garshuni, which is in Syriac script. They saved this document. So there is so much work that needs to be done. There is a lack of interest in that field. Another thing that's very interesting is epigraphy. And I am so pleased with the work of Ahmed al-Jalad and other scholars. There are many French scholars as well who have been working in the field for decades and decades and decades and decades. Muslims don't know anything about this, and some of them don't even want to know about this. But it has radically revised our understanding of early Islamic history and pre-Islamic history. All right? And this is critically important. Um, Yes, critically important. I don't know how much. Well,
Ahmed al-Jalad, he's a
see,
neighbor of
just
ours.
yeah, go ahead.
Right? Like Ahmed al-Jalad is you and me.
Yeah,
He's he's in Columbus. I've
yeah,
actually thought about reaching out to him or just like dropping by Ohio State University during his office hours. Like he's in our mutual neighborhood, you and
right, right,
our region. And yeah, it's not to interrupt you, but his work on epigraphy and like early Arabic scripts is immense. And when I first was introduced to him, like yeah, everyone has intellectual maturity, growth, like he said, evolution. I was a little taken back to him and Marie-Jeanne van Putten in the Netherlands. I was like, how dare these people question the traditions, blah blah blah. And the brother I mentioned who basically his brother kicked the Salafia out of town.
right.
Like not the Salafia in general, but like that vicious, noxious stream. There's one particular Sheikh Jabali. Like, he's an old friend of mine, and he's a brother with a lot of wisdom and knowledge. And he like pointed out to me, it's like, look, all this academic work, it's like, look, if you really believe in Allah, you're not going to be threatened by anything anyway.
Exactly.
And he's like, what you need to get through your thick head because you're not an academician. You can be kind of blunt. It's like, look, it doesn't matter the intention of these different scholars. Like you have a large academic community. If there's good in there, they're going to find it. And because of intellectual honesty, they will have to like basically embrace what's true. And if there's anything that's beneficial, it will come out. And just trust in the process. And these things can increase our understanding of the past. And this is a man who comes from a very old traditional part of Morocco where they have these kind of manuscripts, in people's like walls, mud, like those old fashioned adobe
Yes,
houses,
yes, yes.
cabinet niches, and the families have these old manuscripts until they crumble to dust. And he would make this point. It's like you have no idea, Kamal, what is out there. Most contemporary Muslim, he's like, I'm a Berber slash Arab. He's like, his attitude is like, I'm a Ziri, Berbers, Arabi. He's like, we all come from a very similar source. If you go, a few thousand years ago. It's like, look, we had some great treasure and we lost it because none of us are reading anymore.
Yes.
He's like, don't be like these people. Don't be afraid of knowledge. So sorry to interject. It's just, yeah.